and more insects start going in her hair. And we get one of my favorite lines in the movie where Indy looks out the other hole. We are going to die. And he makes that like weird fucking face. Just, Hello, I just wanted to thank you for clicking on my video, and I wanted to let you know not only do I create content in my YouTube channel here, Class in a Glass, but I'm also on Twitch where I play single-player games, multiplayer games. I do movie reviews, cartoon reviews, and a whole bunch of other stuff. Also, it would be a big help if you can check out my Patreon, where you can gain access to audio commentaries, reactions, and the ability to submit questions for my podcasts and videocasts. And all that content can be found in the links below. In the meantime, enjoy the video.
You know nuts. He's crazy.
I thought archaeologists were always funny little men searching for their mummies.
Mummies.
Before we go ahead and get into tonight's review, we're going to move on to tonight's review, chat. I am doing a scene by scene breakdown to Indiana Jones and the Temple of Doom, chat, the prequel sequel to Raiders of the Lost Ark. First and foremost, I have to ask you a very important question, that question being, how many of you have seen Indiana Jones and the Temple of Doom? Very curious about this. Very curious about this, Jeff. I mean, I would expect every single person, but we don't know. Then he says so many times, Chris says, of course. Alex Mel says yes. Hildeberg, oh, yes, or at least most of it. All right, there we go. Wicked Weekend, I have. DJ actually seen this. Shoot Swordsman. That is Raiders, but I'll allow it. The glowing magic stones, they are called the Shankara stones. Thank you very much. They are the Shankara stones. But yes, they are glowing magic stones. It's true. I have no idea how many times. Same as somebody. I've lost track. Many times. I don't know. Same with Star Wars. Like, I don't know how many times I've watched this. A lot, though. Luke Boss, I've seen it and love it. Drew McCoy, yes, I have. King of Autumn, it was a while, but for a time was my main favorite until, of course, I saw Crusade. What happened? It has some elements that would not. Now, there are some things like racism in the movie. Yes, that is true. Well, the kid went with short round. Indy, I love you. That's true. It was short round, chap. Wicked Weekend, well, the kid. Yep. Billy Gates. Oh yeah, very tasteful. Chilled monkey brains. Of course, man. It's Indian cuisine, right? 101. I know, but wanted to see if you were. I'm on my toes there. You're talking to an Indiana Jones fan, my friend. I know my shit. If I was in charge of writing the Indiana Jones 4, I would write it about Indy pulled back and to uncover the secrets of the Rosetta Stone or the Library of Alexandria. Yeah. Crusade and Raiders are the tied for my favorite. Yeah, no, the Crusade is excellent. Like guys, I was saying in my audio video commentary chat, which you can now listen to and you can soon watch. That'll be posted later this evening, probably after my stream, or at least in the morning. Crusade is so goddamn good. You know, if you were disappointed by Temple of Doom, then like, all right, watch Crusade. It's a nice palate cleanser. It's a little lighter, a little more whimsical. Definitely, obviously not as dark, and I really like the camaraderie between Harrison Ford and Sean Connery. I mean, they have incredible chemistry. But not to say that Temple of Doom doesn't have some amazing stuff, too. It absolutely does, through and through, and I'll talk about that. In terms of its aesthetic, and I love the relationship between Indy and Short Round. I mean, that's his son. I like the darkness of it. I think that's kind of cool, but it could be disturbing. You know, I mean, this movie and also Gremlins create the PG-13 rating. But no, I understand. Toshiba, Temple of Doom is my favorite Indiana Jones as a child. As an adult, I prefer Raiders. Same. No, it's funny you guys are saying this. She talks in her sleep. It's like, Dad? He's like, yes, I fucked her, son. I did indeed. But no, that's the thing. So I have seen this movie many times, Chad. Owned it on I had the VHS trilogy. I said, still own the VHS trilogy, Chad. It's just in my little closet over there. Like Star Wars, I can't tell you how many times I've seen this movie. It was an obsession as a child. Always played these films, Chad, whether I watched them or had them in the background. Just something about it. Indiana Jones is a very important series as a part of my childhood and informed my love of films, action adventure movies, and genre, Chad. Introduced me and opened up so many things. Indiana Jones is a gateway series, Chad, to all sorts of movies, and it'll always have a place in my heart. I absolutely love it. But Temple of Doom, I really enjoy this movie, but I have to admit there are flaws to it, Chad. There are flaws to it. Like I said, it's darker. There is some racism. There are some comedic sequences. Actually, there's a lot of comedic sequences that don't work. Kate Capshaw is awful in the movie. Even Kate Capshaw said, listen, I know I was bad in that movie. I was fucking the director. I know, okay? Get off my back. And I'm like, all right, okay, like, get off your back like Steven Spielberg. It's like, okay. And she's like, ooh, I'm like, I'm sorry. The joke was there. Chad. What could I do? So it has some problems. Fortune and glory, kid. Fortune and glory. Which he says so tiredly. It's like, shit, here we go again. Thank you for the 100 biddies, Deadpool. But there's stuff I love about it, as I said, chat. It's funny, like, you can go in the history of this movie. Spielberg and Lucas always planned to make, Indiana Jones a trilogy. Raiders of the Lost Ark, it was a cultural revelation. It was an amazing pop culture moment, chat, in film. It was huge. Brought back, Steven Spielberg and George Lucas. They grew up on those adventure serials from the 30s and 40s. It's like, hey, let's make them for a modern age. 1981 Raiders hit, huge phenomenon, made so much money. It was nominated for Best Picture, all sorts of awards and accolades, chat. I mean, it's an incredible film. And it's like, how do you follow up from one of the greatest movies ever made, chat? I consider Raiders to be one of the greatest movies ever made. It's in my top 10 films. I could watch it anytime, like, pretty much any Indiana Jones movie. But still, that's my favorite. That's my absolute favorite. How do you follow that up? And it's like, with great difficulty, because Spielberg and Lucas, they disagreed, along with Lawrence Kasdan, who eventually just didn't want to be a part of the film, about the direction of this movie, what they wanted to do. They had thought about, well, we could possibly have it where Indy goes to an island filled with dinosaurs, even though that kind of deals with paleontology and shit, but he's an archaeologist. Whatever, it's the paleontology, archaeology is the same thing. There were ideas of him going to the Lost World, if you will, which, funny enough, Spielberg did do with Jurassic Park, or the Lost World Jurassic Park. And also another one where it's Indiana Jones going to this idea has been around for years, for decades. Indiana Jones and the Monkey King, where Indiana Jones would go to Africa and seek out either the Fountain of Youth or a magical peach tree which would make you immortal, that is guarded by the Monkey King. That's what it is. And fighting against the Nazis and things. And he would also discover a 200-year-old pygmy who would be his sidekick. It's like weird shit. And then, of course, there was the famous one where Lucas was adamant about doing, which they also argued about when they were trying to make Last Crusade, which was the haunted Scottish castle, chat, where Indy would have been exploring a haunted Scottish castle, fighting off this Scottish Highlander lord. And that was one idea they did. Eventually, they settled on Indiana Jones and the Temple of Death. It was called the Temple of Death before they're like, well, it's a little dark. Let's just call it the Temple of Doom, chat, because, death is not as words as doom, apparently. However, some behind-the-scenes stuff was happening in the personal lives of George Lucas and Steven Spielberg. I think George Lucas was in the midst of a divorce, and Spielberg had already divorced his first wife. And he even famously said it's like that really affected his mindset while working on this movie. He was bitter, he was angry, and he felt that was reflected in the film itself and just how violent. And it's a violent movie, chat. I mean, this film, along with another Steven Spielberg produced movie, Gremlins, is what led to the creation of the PG-13 rating. It's like, we can't be fucking ripping people's hearts out and sacrificing them to Kalima Shakti Day and showing that in the theater. The children, they're going to lose their minds. Because when I saw this as a child, I was like, oh my God, it's scary. I'm sorry, it's scary. I'm like that guy, Momam Shabai. I'm right there with that guy. So, yeah, he's like, yeah, it affected him. And he was also fucking Kate Capshaw on set, which, probably, distracted him, chat. But we got Temple of Doom. Again, I don't think it's a bad movie at all. I think it has a lot of great stuff in it. I think Harrison Ford gives a great performance. I love Short Round, as I said before, but it's flawed. It's definitely flawed. And, but it is not the worst Indiana Jones movie, despite what some people like to say. I'm sorry, I'm putting my foot down. It's not. The movie, despite getting a mixed reaction, for its various darker elements and violence, it was a commercial success. She had a budget. It's crazy. This movie was made for less than $30 million. It was made for $28.17 million, had a box office of $333.1, chat. Absolutely incredible. So audiences, they ate that shit up. It's like, give me more Indiana Jones, chat. And what was also unique is that even though this is a sequel to Raiders, it's actually a prequel. Takes place in 1935, chat, 1 year before the events of Raiders of the Lost Ark, since what we see in the opening of every single Indiana Jones movie is usually the location and the year the movie's taking place. We learn that Indiana Jones, Raiders of the Lost Ark, that takes place in Peru in 1936, and eventually Egypt and all those other countries. And, of course, Last Crusade takes place in 1938, 1 year before the breakout of World War II. So I always thought that was interesting. It's like, oh, yeah, this is one of the first, at least that I can think of. There might have been other ones. Well, you know, I mean, you had The Godfather Part 2, which definitely had prequel scenes focusing on Marlon Brando's character, Vito Corleone. But it's like, oh, yeah, shit, yeah, this is like one of the first big prequel movies. It's kind of cool. But yeah, chat, I like it, but now, my friends, we need to go ahead. Gotta go ahead and do my scene by scene breakdown for Indiana Jones and the Temple of Doom. And it's like, okay, well, what do we start off with first, chat? We had this terrific opening that introduced us to Indiana Jones and Raiders of the Lost Ark. We started in a mysterious jungle with Indy surrounded by these mercenaries who he couldn't trust, chat. Went to an ancient temple to steal a golden fertility statue that was front pooping out a baby. Alfred Molina, whose race and ethnicity I still don't know to this day, betrayed him, chat. And eventually was killed, chat, and he was confronted by Belloc, you know, a Belgian rival archaeologist running for his life from the various natives, chat. And we also know about his snake phobia. It's like, that's an iconic opening. That is one of the most iconic openings in film, certainly of the 1980s, chat. And Steven Spielberg's like, well, you know what? I know exactly how to follow up that incredible opening. A dance number. It literally starts with a musical. And the big reason for this, you realize, is Steven Spielberg, throughout his entire life as a director, has been adamant about making a musical, which we have seen recently with his remake of West Side Story, which I've heard is good. I know it was a box office bomb. I just didn't care to see it. I was like, yeah, I just have no desire to see it. But I've heard it's good. But back in the day, chat, back in 1984, he's like, I'm going to make my musical. And George is like, I don't know if you should put that in the beginning of the movie. Steven's like, I'm going to do it. I'm the director, okay? You're the writer. I'm like, all right, what do you want to do? And we get this opening dance number with Kate Capshaw, chat. I wonder why we did the dance number with Kate Capshaw. Because he was fucking her on set. And so she introduces us to this new Indiana Jones film, and like, everything goes. And it's this whole thing where initially we're in a dance club. We're in it's a restaurant, dance club called the Obi-Wan. You see with that reference, Chad? It's a Star Wars reference. And they're dancing. Kate Capshaw's doing this thing. But then we go to this massive fucking sound stage. And I'm like, where is the sound stage? Where is that in this club? I don't think you can fit that in the building. It doesn't matter, Chad. Pay no mind. And we get all these girls dancing, doing their thing. Kate Capshaw showing off the bazunga, showing off the big old behind for Steve and chat. And eventually she is unvored from a dragon's mouth. And we're introduced to Shanghai, chat. We're in Shanghai, 1935, 1 year before the events of Raiders of the Lost Ark. We see this one table in the middle of the room, and we have the Chinese gangster Lao She, chat, with his two sons. There is medium-sized son and skinny son. I read a novel, Indiana Jones novel, called Indiana Jones and the Dinosaur Egg, which is a prequel to this movie. And there was a fat son, but Indy killed him. Lao She doesn't know that, but Indy did kill the fat son. But Chad, we then cut to the staircase where Indiana Jones has borrowed his dad's tuxedo from Goldfinger. It's the white tuxedo, Chad, got the little flower, the pink red flower on there, and he's walking down. It's like, ooh, it kind of starts like a spy film, Chad. I like this. And he goes over the table. He sits down with Lao She. He's like, hey, Lao She, how you doing? He's like, Dr. Jones, have you gotten the ashes of the first emperor of China, Mo Ha-Chi? And he's like, oh, I have indeed, good sir, but do you have what I wanted? Because the thing is, I was going to set to give this to you, but your goddamn regular medium build son tried to kill me, and I had to break his fucking hand. I had to chop off two of his fingers. And the guy's like, how dare you insult my son? He's like, your son's a thieving piece of shit. And then Kate Capshaw is given lines. She is given voice lines. I'm like, why did you let her speak? And she's like, oh my God, wasn't I great, Lao Shay? Isn't he such a doll? Who is this handsome stud? Who are you? He's like, hi, my name is Dr. Jones. She's like, okay, that's so great. Aren't I like really pretty and stuff? Yes. And Lao Shay, he's like, all right, I want the ashes. He's like, I ain't giving you the goddamn ashes, all right? I want to see my shit. And he's like, all right, here, put him on the table, And so he puts it on the table. He's singing a sack. He spins. It's a turntable thing, chat. It's a turntable, like, for spices, and they spin it around. Actually, it'd be perfect for sharing and stuff, like having drinks and eating sushi and everything. But they turn around, and Indy opens it up, and it's like a bunch of gold doubloons, and it's like, hey, I didn't risk my ass, all right, trying to find the first emperor of China's ashes, Ho Chi Minh, all right, or Mo Ha-chi, whatever, so you can give me some gold pirate doubloons. I want the diamond, Lao Che. And fucking Willie, she just helps herself to the gold. That's what she wants. She's like, oh, it's so shiny and pretty. This is great. And so he's like, all right, fuck it. And so eventually they do that. They put the turntable again. They turn around and he puts down this piece of cloth where you assume the diamond's in. And they do we focus on this turntable a lot, Chap. We focus on this turntable a lot. And they turn it all the way around, and oh my God, fucking Willie, she's like, oh, it's beautiful. It's beautiful. And the other guy's like, yeah, that's mine. Thank you very much. And Lao Che's like, okay, now you give me the ashes of Mo Ha-chi. And he's like, all right, I got it. And he beckons over to this waiter chat named Wuhan. Wuhan puts the ashes on the turntable. They spin around. And Lao Che's like, oh, this is so cool. This is awesome. Hey, Indy, why don't we just toast? Why don't we just have a drink right now? Darkseid, I think to me, she was definitely a downgrade from Aaron Ravenwood. Oh, huge downgrade from Aaron Ravenwood. What was joking about Ravenwood is that she wasn't incompetent at all. She wasn't annoying. She was street smart. She was flawed, though. She was flawed. She was an alcoholic. She had a very tumultuous relationship with Indiana Jones, but she was also funny. There were layers to her. Kate Capshaw's character of Willie is, all she does is screech in this movie. She screeches and, berates all the other characters throughout the film. Like, there's nothing redeemable about her, Chad. She's just an annoying person, in my opinion. Blackstone, greetings and salutations to you. Hope you're living long and prospering. This is the movie that created this movie, along with Gremlins, created the PG-13 rating. Blackstone. True. But, Lao Che's like, Indy, why don't we have a drink, to celebrate all this? And so we noticed that the one son who got the fucked up hand, he gets some champagne and he puts like some powder in the champagne glass. And I'm like, okay, that champagne doesn't look like champagne anymore, but whatever. It could be Chinese champagne. And they spin around and Indy's like, hey, fucking to your health, Lao Che. And he drinks it. And now Lao Che's like, and Indiana's like, why are we laughing? Why are we laughing? And he's like, and now, Indiana, Dr. Jones, you will give me the diamond. He's like, why would I give you the diamond? Because of the poison you just drank, Dr. Jones. And he's like, I don't feel good. And he's got a big old messed up tummy chain. He's got bubbly guts. And Indy's like, I give it okay, here. And he puts the diamond on there right then. He starts spinning around. They pocket the diamond, right? The guy takes the diamond. He's like, give me the antidote. And he's like, no. And Indy grabs Willie and is like, I will stab the shit out of her. I will gut her in front of you with this knife. And Lao Che's like, I don't care, kill the girl. I'll just find another. And Willie's like, why would you say that, Lao Che? I thought we had something. And at this point, it's like, oh, this situation is getting worse and worse. But then all of a sudden, chat, Wuhan the waiter, he comes over and reveals that he's a friend of Indiana Jones. They had many adventures, and if you played Indiana Jones in the Emperor's Temple, the Tomb of the Dragon Emperor, then you learn who that character was. They give a little backstory for him, chat, because he helped him with the Emperor's Tomb. And he comes over with a pistol, and he's like, it pays to have friends, Lao Che. And he's like, oh, no. But then everyone starts, uncorking. A whole bunch of champagne. Pop, 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 starts popping it, and they use it as a cover to then shoot Wuhan. And Wuhan's like, Indy, and Indy's like, no, my favorite brown boy. But we don't know about Short Round yet, Chad. And this then again follows the rules. If you're brown, you're going down in this movie, Chad. I'm sorry, but that is just the case across many of Steven Spielberg's films. The first death of the movie, Chad, and it's Wuhan, everyone's favorite character, Wuhan, Chad. And he's like, Indy, remember in the N64 Indiana Jones games, The Emperor's Tomb? Wasn't that great? Ugh, and he dies. And Indy gets really fucking pissed. And he's also super woozy at this point. And he sees this waiter who has these giant flaming shish kebabs. And he literally just takes one of these giant flaming shish kebabs and just yeets it into the skinny son of Lao Che, who dies instantly. And he's like, and he like shoots it, and then it's fucking chaos, chat. Lao Che's medium-sized build son, he loses the diamond, and it's like all these bodyguards start coming out and thugs start coming out, and they all start shooting at Indy. Willie, she's trying to find the diamond, but then this whole big old ice bucket gets spilled on the floor, and she's like, no! And she's trying to find it. She's like, I don't give a fuck, but anyway, I'm gonna get I need my diamond. And so Indy, he starts fighting all these guys, guys with medium-sized Lao Che shooting everybody. Eventually, this one guy comes on here with a Tommy gun, and Lindy's like, shit, I gotta hide behind the Paramount logo. So we have this steel Paramount logo, and he just hides behind that, chat. He hides behind that, and he cuts it. He cuts the cables that are on it. Boo, boo, boo. As medium-sized Lao Che starts, just starts shooting at it, everything. Shooting at both. Eventually, Willie does indeed find the diamond, and she puts it between the bazungas. Also, she gets the antidote as well off the ground, puts it between the bazungas to keep things safe, as you know. But as they're rolling with the giant Paramount logo, chat, they eventually yeet themselves through the window. They yeet themselves through the window and fall all the way down until they're in the back of what looks like a taxi cab, who are introduced to Short Round. And he's like, oh, hello, Dr. Jones, crash landing. And he's like, Shorty, I don't feel great. Get us out of here, Shorty. He's like, okay, Dr. Jones, hold on to your potatoes. Now, I'm going to tell you right now, I love Short Round, chat. He is the true son of Indiana Jones. Get rid of that Mutt Williams, get rid of the Shia LaBeouf. Nothing against the actor, but they did not write him well in any capacity. I didn't like the whole, rebel without a cause take on that character. It didn't sit well with me, Chad, that 50s greaser. But I love that Indy found this orphan and has been taking care of him for years. Now, we learn why. So, in expanded materials, we learn why we don't see Short Round in Raiders or in The Last Crusade, and that's because he was sent to boarding school. That's what happened, Jay. He was sent to boarding school, and we don't see him in the movie, and he's like, yeah, I guess I'm just going to breed resentment between me and my kid. But they could fix it, Chef. They bring him back for the next movie. I already told you my idea for how they can fix that relationship and bring him back, but he is the true son of Indiana Jones. And so Short Round, he knows the streets of Shanghai like the back of his little hand, Chef. And we go on a nice little car chase throughout Shanghai, while Indy is just going into the dress of Willie, trying to grab the antidote. He's like, where is it? She's like, oh my God, you're touching my bazungas. And he is definitely touching her bazungas, Chef, but he gets the antidote, uncorks it, downs that. She's like, men are such pigs. He's like, just give him the antidote, lady, my lord. Come on. Jesus Christ. Eventually, Chad, Indiana Jones, he's trying to get like all of his stuff out, and he's like busts open the back of the car cab, and he starts shooting at Lao Che's thugs who are chasing after him, and he's like, I gotta get some more shit, I gotta get my spare bullets, hold my gun for me, and he gives Willie the gun. She's like, oh, the gun is hot, ooh, ooh, and she literally just throws it out the car window, Chad, and Indy's like, where's my gun? Where's my gun? And she's like, I burned my fingers and I broke a nail. It's like, oh, Chad, she burned her fingers and she broke a goddamn nail. Of course. Eventually, Short Round, he almost runs over several pedestrians. And you also have those those man taxi cabs where it's literally a guy running with a basket of people. And what he does is that he hits the basket of people and the guy goes up in the air. It's like, ah, but he crashes. He's safe. It's fine. He has a safe landing, chat. Eventually, a bunch of Lao Che's thugs, they're still chasing after him, but they crash too, and they're able to get away. But it took them a very little time to organize a plane, chat. They're like, okay, well, last minute, I'm sure we'll be okay. They stop, and who is their organizer for their plane trip, chat? Dan Aykroyd. There's a cameo from Dan Aykroyd. This is the guy. He's like, oh, Dr. Jones, I'm sorry we couldn't organize you, better accommodations. You'll have to fly with poultry. And he's like, that's great, Dan Aykroyd. I appreciate that. We're just going to go ahead and get going. And Dan Aykroyd's like, goodbye, everybody. I'll see you on SNL. And he leaves. And Indy, he boards the plane with Willie and Short Round. They get on there. And then Lao Che, he stops his car right in front of the plane like, ooh, they're getting away. I mean, you could literally just shoot the plane, but maybe doesn't want to make sure he doesn't get killed too or arrested. And he says, better luck next time, Lao Che. And he closes the door. And you realize that the plane is owned by Lao Che. I would have probably asked Dan Aykroyd, like, hey, make sure not to book our next plane trip from the guy who has been trying to kill me throughout this entire opening sequence. And Lao Che is like, have a safe trip, Dr. Jones. And then apparently he set this up ahead of time, and he salutes the pilots, and the pilots are like, hell yeah, we're gonna kill him, I guess. They're gonna slit their throats? Like, no. No, I'm not going to do that, Chad. I'm going to do something much dumber. Eventually, I mean, that's what you would have done when they're sleeping. Just stab, stab, stab. Let's fly back to Shanghai, China. Eventually, where they take off, Chad, they're taking off, and we get the classic Indiana Jones map going across the world. Like, they're going to Delhi. That's where they want to head to. They want to head to Delhi so we can get back to the west. But we then are inside the cabin of the plane, and Willie is complaining. She's very pissed off about all of the poultry there, and she's like, who the hell are you? It's just like, listen, you should be lucky that you got out alive, okay? Stop criticizing me, goddammit. And she's like, I am a lady. I deserve better accommodations. And Short Round's like, this bitch is really annoying, Dr. Jones. He's like, I agree, Shorty, I agree. And she's like, well, by the end of this trip, you'll be lusting after me, no doubt. He's like, oh, yeah? And he fucking puts his hat on his head and falls asleep. Oh, they all fall asleep, Chad, eventually. Stab, smother, shoot. Multiple options to do things, Chad. It's hours later, you assume, and the pilot's in the cockpit, and they go like, okay, now's the time to kill Indiana Jones, his son, and the annoying, screaming white lady. But they're like, no, that would be too easy. Instead, let's make sure to get let's shoot out the rest of the fuel from the plane, and we're going to abandon the plane and let them crash into the side of a mountain. Which is like, why don't you just kill them and then dump the body? It doesn't matter. They could have just dumped the body. Could have yeeted the bodies out of the fucking plane. But they get rid of the fuel. They get on their parachutes. They start walking. The one guy, clearly like the leader, is like, come on, let's do it. The other guy's like, oh, he's very scared. And they open up the door, and he's arguing with the skinnier, taller guy, and he throws him out, and he goes, Uta! He says something in Chinese, I assume, and he also jumps out. Eventually, Willie, she wakes up. She's like, what's going on? And then she goes to the cockpit, and she's like, oh my God. And she goes over, Mr. Jones, and fucking Short Round comes, you call him Dr. Jones, doll. He's like, okay, Dr. Jones. He's like, oh, good. Did we land? She's like, no, we didn't land. And he takes him to the cockpit. She goes, look. He's like, oh, that's not good. That's not good. And so he gets into the cockpit, chat, and she's like, do you know how to fly a plane, right? He goes, no. Do you? And she's like, oh, we're gonna die. I'm too young to die. But he's like, it's okay. I got this figured out. It's no problem. Shorty, what do you got? Got parachutes? He's like, Dr. Jones, no more parachutes. He's like, fuck. Okay, well, I can fly. This is no problem, all right? Speedometer, that's looking good. Altitude's looking good. Fuel, and the fuel's like going down all the way to zero, chat. And he's like, shit, we're in trouble. And he's like, Shorty, what are we doing? He's like, I only found this, Dr. Jones, and it's an inflatable life raft. And Cape Cap's just like, we're not sinking, we're crashing. Ooh. And he's like, shut up. And they get to the back of the plane. And they get the inflatable raft in front of them, like Indy's in front, Short Round is behind Indy, and Kate Capshaw is right behind Short Round. So they're just crushing Short. He's like, I can't breathe, Indy. And he's like, all right, let's go. Ah! And they all fucking yeet themselves off the plane, Chad. The plane crashes into a side of a mountain, Chad, as this inflatable raft falls hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of feet, and then boop, lands safely on the snowy mountainside and just starts going down. Now, people ask me, like, Chris, you criticize Indiana Jones and the Kingdom of the Crystal Skull because Harrison Ford survived a nuclear blast while hiding inside refrigerators. Like, yes, I do, because that scene is stupid. And I'll tell you why this scene works for me. I'll tell you why. It's why all the ridiculous scenes throughout the trilogy work for me, because the aesthetic is the same across the board, whether it be in the first or second or third film. They use practical effects. They use mannequins. They use miniatures. They use blue screen, chat. There is an aesthetic to these movies that is thoroughly consistent. And it's like, all right, yes, it is exaggerated. It is fantastical. It is supernatural. You pick the word you want to use, chat. Ridiculous, stupid. Yeah, but they've maintained their aesthetic, and they've never deterred from that. Where in Indiana Jones, the Kingdom of the Crystal Skull, what bothers me about that movie is, like Spielberg said, I am not using practical effects. I am not going to have these elaborate sets and shoot on location. Fuck that. That's too much work. It's all going to be CGI and green screens. And when I see that, it's like the aesthetic of Crystal Skull does not match in any capacity. I'm sorry, it does not match in any capacity to the Indiana Jones trilogy. And that's why Crystal Skull is as criticized as it is, Chad. Because of that. I don't know. Spielberg suffers from the same thing that Lucas eventually suffered from, and what Ridley Scott suffers from, and a lot of the filmmakers suffer from, is that they forget the aesthetics of their movies. And it really bothers me. And that was one of the many reasons why I don't like Crystal Skull, but it's neither here nor there. I don't mind the raft sequence in Temple of Doom. I think it's fun. And, we see, like, yes, there's a lot of blue screens in this shot. That's okay. But they're going down this mountainside, chat, crashing in the trees and shit, holding on for your dear life. And eventually they get out of there. They get out. I was like, oh, it's clear. And Indiana Jones is like, see, that wasn't so bad, huh? Oh. And they just careen over this multiple 100-foot cliffside, chat, all the way into these rushing rapids. And they're in these rapids, chat, and they're hitting rocks, and Willie's smashing her dumb face in the rocks, chat. She's getting even derpier and dumber and screeching even louder, chat. You'd think if she hit that first rock, she would stop screeching, but it just gets louder, chat. It's like her mouth is enlarged even more. But eventually, they get to calm waters, and they're like, holy fucking shit, let's just take a moment to relax, because they're exhausted, we can't do anything, and they just float down River, Chad, and I guess eventually they're just, it's now hot. We go from extreme temperatures, Chad. We go to snow, we go to forests, we go to rivers, and now we're in a very hot, arid-looking environment, and they're just hanging out like, oh my God. And Short Round is like, oh, Indy, where are we? And Kate Capshaw is like, yeah, that's a good question. But then we see in the riverbank, chat, these two old feet just following them along. And eventually he just stops right in front of them. And Indy's like, we're in India. And she's like, how do you know that? And he starts doing the namaste to the guy in the riverbank. And apparently, Short Round and Kate Capshaw, especially Kate Capshaw, are terrified of old Indian people. And we cut to this old Indian man who has hair as white as Santa Claus, just going, hey, what's up? How you doing? And he's like, hey, well, I'm going to help you guys. You seem to be, need of some assistance. Why don't you come to my village? I have a quest for you. And so he's like, I don't really want to do a quest. So he's like, you will. And so they go to his village, and it does not look great. Everyone's miserable. Everyone is starving to death. And they're all like surrounded, like, oh God, rich white people. Ooh. And they're like, please. And Indy's like, what's going on here? And Kate Capshaw's like, oh my God, don't touch me. It's like, God damn it, Kate Capshaw. And he starts talking. The leader brings him to this, looks like this ceremonial site, chat, where there's this little alcove where it looks like a stone used to be. And they do have a translator there with them who apparently went to some university in like the UK or something. But he's translating for the village elder, and Indy's translating then to all of all of us, the audience itself, in Cape Capture and Short Round, and he's telling them like there were these raiders that came through and they devastated the village multiple times over, and eventually they stole this magic rock. This magic stone that they worship and that they believe is what gives their village life. And eventually he's like, wait, because he's like, are you serious what you're saying? And Cape Capture Short Round are like, what is he saying? He's like, they took their children. They stole all their children. It's like, geez, like this is a dark movie, Chad. Like they stole all the kids. What did they steal the kids for? I don't know, but I don't like the sound of this. Eventually, you're like, well, you guys must be hungry after hearing that traumatic tale of our hardships. Come on in. And so they go into one of their little huts, and they start giving them a whole bunch of food. And Cape Capture's like, and it's, oh no, I'm sorry, I don't eat poor food. I don't eat dirty poor food. And he's like, this is more food than they eat in a week. All right, eat. And she's like, no, well, if you can have it, you can have it. She's like, first of all, you're insulting them and embarrassing me. Open up your big fat gob and start eating whatever the fuck is on that plate. And she's like, okay. And she's like, ugh. And she starts eating and she's crying and shit. And Short Round's telling Indy, I want to leave. I want to get the fuck out of here. If they're stealing kids, I'm the only kid that lives here now. That's it. It's just me. And he's like, all right, well, tell me more about these stones. And the guy starts translating, basically saying like, oh, yeah, there's the Shankara stones. He's like, whoa. The Shankara stones? Really? The Shankara stones? He goes, yeah. He's like, okay, that might be something to look into. And they're like, listen, you're going to go get, and the village elder, he's able to speak perfect English. And he's like, you're going to go to Pankot Palace because that is where the Thuggy cult has reestablished themselves. And Kate Capture's like, what's the Thuggy cult? And Indy's like, it was this this ancient cult that was run out by the British when they took over India. And I guess they've been gone for decades. Why would they come back? It's like, well, they've reestablished themselves. They've taken over Pankot Palace, and much evil comes from Pankot Palace, where the Maharaja now reigns, the new young Maharaja. And he's like, you're going to go there, and you're going to get our children back and our stone. And he's like, I just want to go back home to America. I don't really want to do this. And he's like, okay, if you say so, but we're going to have to guilt you. And he's like, all right, best of luck to you. And then we then cut, and it's later that evening, and we see this very poor, emaciated child wander into the village chat, just like, just breathing heavy, has something clutching his little scrawny hand. And Andy's just kind of hanging around. He's walking around and stuff. And he sees this child just approach him. He's like, oh my God. And this child collapses in his hands. And this old woman comes, and he gives Indy this piece of cloth, and he takes it. And this old woman comes over. She's like, oh, and she starts crying because he realizes, like, oh, that's her son. That's her son. She takes him, and the kid's fine, by the way. He lives. Lisa, hard hands, good to see you. Lisa, talking about emaciated, small, tortured children. And Indy starts looking at it, and it's this image of this man talking to Shiva, the destroyer chat, the god, if you will, an Indian god, Hindu god. And Short Round, eventually, he walks over to Indiana Jones, who's standing next to a blue screen, and he goes, what is it, Indy? And he's like, oh, this is an ancient drawing of this carpenter who was gifted 5 of the Shankara stones from Shiva. And they gave the person great wealth and great power and dominance over many, many lands. And it's like, if this kid had it, and if he came from Pankot Palace, then Shorty, we can go get this stuff. And he's like, what's the stuff, Dr. Jones? He's like, fortune and glory, kid. Fortune and glory. And so now we cut. And it's the next day, and he's like, yes, I mean, I don't really care about the kids, but I do want these diamonds inside these stones, thank you very much. And everyone gets an elephant. It's an elephant parade. Indy gets the big elephant, Cape Capture gets the medium-sized elephant, and Short Round gets the little elephant. But Cape Capture, she does not like riding that elephant, Chad. She can barely get her ass up there. They have to hoist her up, and she's riding it backwards. But they keep on going. And I guess Kate Capshaw is offended by the stench of the elephant, and she starts taking out this perfume and just pouring it on the elephant's head, which I imagine definitely angers it, because it's like, get this, what are you pouring on me? It burns. I don't like it. And Indy's like, would you stop messing around with it, Willie? He's like, I have to because it smells. It smells like pores do. And the elephant's like, fuck you, bitch. And it takes in a whole bunch of water and just squirts her in the face, and she falls into this lagoon. She's like, I hate this. I hate this so much. I'm a singer. I'm ruining my voice by sounding like this. I was so happy in Shanghai. I had a nice apartment and a garden. I had a picket fence. And Indy and Short Round just looking at her like, oh, I just hope you die along this journey. But she gets back in the elephant. They continue on their way. And they're like, all right, fuck it. Let's just make camp for the night because Willie's going to keep complaining and screaming. And we get like a really wholesome scene. Well, it's a wholesome scene that is ruined by Kate Capshaw because Kate Capshaw is literally just screeching even more around like the campfire because she keeps being attacked by various flora and fauna that lives in the jungle, chat. Giant fucking vampire bats start attacking her. We have other wildlife and Komodo dragons, but while we are getting a super wholesome scene between Indiana Jones and Short Round playing a game of cards. And I love this scene, because it really showcases what the relationship is. And eventually they're playing poker or whatever. And Short Round sees, like, Indy takes, like, 2 cards. He's only supposed to take 1. And Short Round's like, you cheat, Dr. Jones, you cheat. You take 2 cards. You take 2 cards. He's like, I didn't mean to. I meant to take 1. You take 2 cards. You cheat. You cheat right me. You cheat my money. And then eventually Indy notices that he has a card in his sleeve. And he's like, what's this? What's this? And I love it because the actor, let's give some credit to the actor who plays Short Round, Chad. He fucking kills it. As Jonathan Key Kwan. He has this cute little smile on his face, because he knows he's been caught, and I think it's just so goddamn adorable, chat. And he's still, despite smiling and laughing, he's still trying to like, no, you cheat, Dr. Jones, and he's like, no, you cheated, little kid. It's so cute. It's cute, but it's ruined because fucking Kate Capshaw keeps screeching in the background. Eventually, she stops screeching, and he's like, I take money. I play with you no more. I play with you no more, Dr. Jones. And he takes the money, and he's like, all right, here you go, kid. Kate Capshaw sits down. It's like, how did you find your little helper, your little friend? And it's like, okay, tragic backstory time. Apparently, Short Round's family was murdered when Japan invaded China in 1933. Firebombed his home, killed his parents. And I found him trying to pick my pocket a few years ago, and I've been raising him ever since. And she's like, wow, I didn't know the pores went through so much hardship. He goes, yeah, indeed. And she's like, well, why are we going to the Pankot Palace anyway? And he's like, all right, I'll tell you. And it's because of this thing right here. And he shows her the piece of cloth, explains the story of the guy getting the Shankara stones from Shiva. And inside them, they're diamonds. She's like, whoa, diamonds? That's like really awesome and stuff. And eventually the elephant like keeps hitting her head like over and over again, like trying to bother her and stuff. And eventually this big fucking snake just lands right on the side of her shoulder. And he's like, and she's like, knock it off. And she throws the snake, and he's like, oh! He's like having a panic attack. And she's like, I hate that elephant. Eventually, it's the next day. And they're walking close to the Pankot Palace, and they look above them, and there's like these looks like giant birds flying above them. She's like, oh, what pretty birds. And he's like, those aren't birds, honey. Those are giant vampire bats. She's like, oh my God, like Dracula. As they get close to the palace, though, the guides go up ahead of them, and they just kind of stop dead in their tracks. They're like, oh, Momom Shabai. And he's like, what the hell's going on? He's like, we ain't going any farther. And he's like, why? And the guy points, and there's like some statues behind some shrubbery, if you will, behind some flora. And so he walks up there, chat, and he uncovers this statue that is lathered in human blood, human fingers, severed human fingers, ears, eyeballs, and peens. This fucking statue has a penis necklace, chat. What the fuck kind of kinky shit are they doing in Pankot Palace, chat? I don't know. These guys are like, well, I don't want to add my penis to the penis necklace that statue is wearing. I'm leaving along with all the other guides. And Cape Cap's just like, Indy, they're taking our rides. And he's like, we walk from here. And eventually they walk onto a set that's supposed to be Pankot Palace, chat. There are no guards anywhere. No fucking guards. And eventually they meet kind of the major domo, chat, of Pankot Palace, Chatra Lal, who spent time in Oxford, chat. Came back, and he has a nice, cushy job. And Dr. Jones introduces himself. He's like, hi, my name is Dr. Jones. This is, fucking Willie, the screeching, hollering monkey. And this is Short Round, my son. We were told to come here for refuge. I'm a professor. I just want to contact my colleagues back in America. And he's like, oh, your reputation precedes you, Dr. Jones. Yes, please do come in. The Maharaja will very much like to meet you. You can get washed, you can dress, and you can join us for a fine feast. And Indy and everyone else is like, well, that sounds fucking great. Now we get to what is probably the most dated and most racist scene in the movie. It's like, listen, it's dated and racist, but it's still kind of funny. Like it is, like it's cool. Chat, it's cool, but it's racist. It totally is, because Indian people do not eat this kind of stuff, chat. But apparently Steven Spielberg and George Lucas were so giddy about this scene. They're like, oh, it's going to be so cool. We're going to have eyeballs, and we're going to have snake babies, and we're going to have monkey brains. Chill the monkey brains. And they were just all about it. And they didn't realize, like, oh, we kind of made entire culture look like they're savages by eating all this stuff. And it's like, yeah, pretty shitty of you. So they didn't realize, but because of that, chat, they then were like, all right, well, we don't want to offend anyone eventually when we do Last Crusade. So their whole idea for like having take place in Africa, they're like, okay, we got to scrap that. We don't want to offend anybody. Which makes sense. Mr. How many think of these dated and racist? It could still be, it's iconic. I'll take that. Still be iconic, chat. Who else think of 2 biddies? Or 3 biddies? I think what saves is that these people are part of a weird cult, right? That's true. All these people are part of the thuggy cult. So maybe this is what the thuggy cult eats. But, we don't know that yet. But it's later that evening. Dr. Jones is in this nice fucking suit. Kate Capshaw comes out. She's wearing this fucking golden dress, showing off the bazoongas, chat, showing off the badonkadonk. She's got her strut on. And, Short Round, they didn't give him any new goddamn clothes. He's still wearing his little, Mets cap. And his little outfit that he had on before. They don't have any. Well, they have plenty of clothes for children, chap. They don't want to play their hand too soon. But they all meet up in the big dining room where everyone else is there. The whole Maharaja's court. And Kate Capshaw comes up to Indy and she's like, oh my God, I heard the Maharaja is fucking loaded and he's single. Can you believe that? Indy is like, I guess a future husband for your hat. Yes, us ladies of standing deserve to be treated like queens, Indiana. I can't wait to meet the Maharaja. And they all sit down in their place. And eventually they'll Short Round and Kate Capshaw, they sit together. They sit next to a big fat guy. Kate Capshaw sits next to a very big fat guy who is apparently also smelly, and she just literally uncorks the rest of her perfume and just dumps it on the guy who apparently is too big and fat and lazy to even notice someone is dumping copious amounts of perfume on him. It's like, okay, sure. And eventually everyone's like, you can't start eating until the Maharaja arrives, Chad. And we then hear this gong. We hear this gong going off. And who fucking comes in, chat? The Maharaja, who looks to be about 10 years old. And Kate Capshaw's like, fuck. And Short Round's like, you want to get with him? You want to get with him right now? And she's like, shut up, you little shit. And he comes and sits down. And he's like, all right, pores, go ahead and start feasting. And so we get 2 interesting scenes here. One, I'm going to start with the background scene, chat, because it's interesting. We're introduced to another character who has the name of Colonel Blumblart. I'm not joking. He's one of the British officials and military men, because India is still a colony of the British Empire at this time during 1935. And he has been surveying the various Indian lands and also investigating this thuggy cult. And he's there, and Indiana Jones asking Colonel Blumblart if he's encountered this thuggy cult. He's like, I have not encountered this thuggy cult, Indiana Jones. I would know. And, Shadow Law's like, what are you talking about? What are you talking about, a thuggy cult? And he's like, well, we were told by these villagers that apparently, who were raided by members of the thuggy cult, that they originated from Pangkot Palace. And he's like, oh, so you just took their word for it, and now you're placing the blame on us. And he's like, no, that's not what I'm doing. He's like, hey, Dr. Jones, I've heard a lot about you and your reputation. When you happen to be in a certain country at some time and appropriating things, and he's like, listen, man, I'm an archaeologist, another name for white appropriation. And he's like, and he's like, and I'm sure when you were trying to escape that certain country of origin that they wanted to take your hands was for thievery. He's like, they weren't trying to take my hands. Maybe your feet then. It wasn't my feet. It was my, it wasn't that. And he's like, literally, they were going to cut off his dick and balls because he was appropriating so much culture there, chat. And then the Maharaja, he speaks up, and he's like, hey, listen, I'm aware, and he talks like this, I am aware of the legacy of Pengkat Palace. I know there was great evil here once, but I assure you, as your Maharaja, that will never return. We don't have child slaves. And they're like, yeah, woo, great speech, Maharaja. But then, chat, we get to the racism. It's already been racist, kind of. We get to the racism, chat. Like, I'm like, that's an amazing impression, thank you. That the kid has a very particular kind of voice. It's super high pitched. But then, chat, we get to the racism, and they start laying out all this food in front of Kate Capshaw, and she's like, what is this? And they put out this giant platter, which is just fully filled up with an anaconda. And the big fat guy who's like, ooh, my favorite. And she's like, what the hell is that? He's like, snake, surprise. And they cut open the snake, and it's filled with either our eels. I think these are actually eels, but they're supposed to be baby snakes. And they're either eels or baby snakes. And she's like, oh my God. And the fat guy and everyone else starts to eat all of the baby snakes and live eels. It's pretty rough. It's like, oh Jesus, oh my God. She can't hold. She's like, ugh. And she's like, short round, give me your hat. He's like, why? And he goes, I'm gonna throw up in it. He's like, no, lady, no, don't throw up in my hat. It's iconic. Eventually, they bring out the next course, which is these giant scarabs, which are filled with scarab meat, and everyone just starts eating all of it. You see this one guy where he cracks open a scarab and starts like sucking up all the scarab guts. He's like, why are you not eating? And she's like, oh, I had bugs for lunch. He goes, oh, yes, of course. And he fucking burps loudly and grossly, and she's like, oh, my tummy. And eventually, they bring, she calls over a waiter. She's like, listen, can I have, like, something simple? Like some soup? Like some regular Indian soup. And he's like, yeah, I can bring you some fine Indian soup. Thank you, by the way, to Pablo Bayer. Thank you for the volume and Huckleberry and Hugh Grinch. Currently reviewing Indiana Jones and the Temple of Doom. But this guy brings over some soup. Opens it up, it's in this big old bowl, it's got a big old top on it, and she's like, oh, it looks great. She opens it up, she's like, Sharon hasn't eaten anything either, he's hungry too, and then she puts her spoon in it, and it's filled with eyeballs, because I guess Indian people love their eyeball soup. She's like, and she cries. And then, the final course is coming, dessert. And she's like, what's for dessert? And we see everyone's all the waiters are bringing out these giant cups, these giant golden cups with the heads of monkeys on them. They put each one in front of each person, and the one big fat guy is like, oh, chilled monkey brains. And he starts sucking, he starts downing those chilled monkey brains, and Cape Capshaw says, and she fucking faints, chat, from disgust. It's so wrong. It's so goddamn dirty. It would have been funny if they saw Short Round being grossed out and they called him, I know your Chinese ass ain't judging. Oh, well, they didn't do that. But it's later in the evening. They go back from dinner, and Indy, he played it smart. He got a big old plate of it's Short Round. Short Round, he got himself a big plate of fruit. It's like, ooh-wee, can't wait to eat all these grapes and oranges and bananas and apples. And Indiana Jones takes that shit from him and says, I'm gonna go check on Willie. And Short Round looks at him and goes, yeah, make sure that's all you do. Get it, chat? He's going to go check on Willie, like his Willie. Sex. He's talking about sex. And Short Round's fucking smart. He knows. He's like, well, whatever happens, tell me what you do to her. And he goes back into the room. He's like, scram, get out of here. He then goes to her door. knocks on it, puts the fruit behind his back. She opens, he's like, what the hell do you want? I just wanted to see if you want me to come in, make sure you're doing okay. She's like, the last thing I want to fucking see is your face. And he's like, okay. He turns around, he takes a big old loud bite of an apple, and she's like, oh my God. And she like basically like grabs his hand, goes, delicious. And he's like, presents the other plate of fruit. She's like, oh my God, you know what? This is really great of you. I almost would think that you're somewhat charming. And he's like, well, I have my charms. The ladies have taken a liking to Dr. Jones on occasion. She's like, it's very funny. That's very funny. See, where I'm from, every single man was lusting after me. And by the time that clock hits 5 minutes from now, you'll be back in here wanting to fuck me. And he's like, I don't think so. I think you'll want to go into my room where Short Round will watch us creepily like a dog on the side of the bed as we have the sex. And she's like, no way. And he's like, I bet you 5 minutes. That's all we need. And so they go back to their rooms. And they're just two really horny, hungry adults, chat. Cape Capshaw's just sitting on the bed looking at the clock like, okay, it's 5 minutes. Indiana Jones, Short Round is instantly falling asleep. That kid must be exhausted, chat. Though it makes sense. He's malnourished. And, they've had a hell of an adventure for the last several days. But he's on the bed, and he's just super horny. And he's like, oh, God damn it. He's looking at the clock, and he's like, hasn't been 5 minutes yet. Shit. He's like, but they're like, well, who's going to go to each room? And eventually, then he's like, whatever. She ain't coming. I guess I can't get off tonight. And we see that behind him, there's this giant portrait, this mural of all these people. And this one guy walks out of the portrait. He's been in the room the whole time. So when Short Round walked in, he was just looking at Short Round like this the whole time. But he walks over. It's actually a pretty cool scene. He walks him out of the darkness and begins strangling Indiana Jones, trying to get him off. And Kate Capshaw, she's like, I'm horny. And so she exits her room, and she's like, Indiana Jones, this is the night you'll regret for the rest of your life. You could have seen my bazookas. And he's like, ah! And Short Round, who is dead asleep, he eventually is like, what's going on here? He's like, oh my God. And he gets up, Dr. Jones, you need help? He's like, shut up. And Shorty throws in the whip. Indiana Jones throws the guy over. He starts whipping him and shit. But eventually the whip gets around the guy's neck, and the guy pulls the whip, and there's a giant ceiling fan that's going super fast above them, Chad, and it goes up, and it takes the guy up, and he's also, and it snaps his neck, Chad, and he hangs himself, and Shorty's like, wow, that was fucking cool. And he's like, Shorty, stay here. And he goes in and checks for Cape Capshaw, who's just waiting on the bed. And Andy just bursts in going, she's like, Andy, you came. And he's like, oh, be gentle. Like he's so horny, he's about to go just get on top of her, chat. And he's like looking around. She's like, Indy, I'm right here. Indy's like, let's get out of my way. He's like, no, Indy, I'm right here. And eventually he goes over, he notices some things, looks in the mirror, looks at the paintings and things, and he sees this giant bouquet, this vase filled with flowers, and there's like a draft, but there's no wind. And he's like, where's that coming from? And he goes over to this giant fireplace. He goes over to it, walks to it, and he sees this statue that has big old bosoms on it and a big old booty. And he's like, starts rubbing it and shit. And he places his hands on the big bosom chat because, that's what you do. Of course, the big bosom statues. And K-Cap's just like, hey, I'm right here. And he presses in on the bosoms chat, and it goes in. It's a door. It's a secret door. She's like, whoa, holy shit. And we see the mural. You see this mural of Shiva and the man that Shiva gives the Shankara stones to. And he's like, I think this is it. I think this is the place. And he goes, Short Round, get my hat and get my fucking gun. We're going to Indiana Jones the shit out of this place. Like, hell yeah. He says, Kate Capshaw, you stay here. You stay here. And so then we cut to Indiana Jones and Short Round as they enter this tunnel, and they're walking down. And all of a sudden, they start hearing something like crunching under their feet. And Short Round, who apparently, he's Chinese, and he showcases that often, he says, Indy, the ground is crunchy. It feels like fortune cookie. And Indy gets his little... He has a little lighter, he lights it, and the entire ground and the walls are covered in hundreds and thousands of bugs, chat. Cockroaches, stick bugs, all sorts of gross shit. It's like, oh, I hate it. And they're like, oh my God, Showround's freaking out. And he's like, it's okay, it's okay. Showround, because he gets scared. But, Indiana Jones, being a goddamn dad, takes the bugs off of him, so make sure that he's okay. And he notices there's a tunnel. He notices another room, a tunnel, and he's like, let's go in there. And he's like, he burns himself. They step inside there, and he's like looking around, and he sees like another, he's like, okay, it's out here. But Short Round, he steps on a button on the ground and goes boop, and the door starts shutting. And he's like, oh shit. And he goes over to the far side. He's about to dive in, and he looks at Short Round, who's just standing there because he's scared because he's a little kid. He's like, oh, I don't know what to do. And he's like, Short Round, kid, fuck. And the thing's closed. And they're locked inside this room. The door behind them also shut. And Showround starts approaching Indy, like, who's looking around. There's dead bodies and skulls everywhere. And he goes, no, don't move. Don't move. I love almost like his line. He's like, just stand over there. Almost like he's exasperated. And Showround, who feels bad, he goes to stand against the wall. He puts his little fanny against this, looks like the stone lever, and it goes inside the wall, and he's like, oh, and all of a sudden we see the ceiling start to lower down and these huge spikes come out of it, and he's like, you told me to stand against the wall, that is what I do. And he's like, oh shit, Willie, get over here, we're in trouble. And Kid Capsha's like, I don't really want to go in there. And it's like, Willie, you got to come over here. You got to get over here right now. And she's like, okay, I'm coming. I'm just getting my nightgown, Jesus. And so she goes in the tunnel. And she starts like crunching on the floor. She goes, oh God, what is this? Oh, she gets like a lantern too. She has like a little lantern. Eventually, she gets to the door. Indy's trying to stop the ceiling from coming down on them and squishing them. He puts this human skull, puts it right in there to slow it down a little bit. And he's like, hey, fucking Willie. And she's like, hold on, I'm coming. She's like, oh no, I broke a nail. And she turns her hand around. There's this giant fucking abomination bug. She's like, oh! And all the bugs start crawling up her hair, Chad, and into her dress and down her cleavage. And she's like, oh my God. And she's like, Willie, if you look outside, you might see like a compartment of some sort. I need you to put your hand into it to open up the door on the other side. And she's like, oh, there's like 2 little compartments. And he's like, you're right, Willie, go to your right. And of course, the right one is just gross and covered in like insect semen splooge. And she's like, it's covered in insect semen splooge. She's like, do it. And she goes for the other one to the left, and she puts her hand in there. She's like, ooh. And then Indy's hand comes out and grabs her. She's like, oh, it's like, no, your other right. And she's like, oh, and she puts her hand inside there, and it's just all covered in insect semen splooge, and more insects start going in her hair. And we get one of my favorite lines in the movie where Indy looks out the other hole. We are going to die. And he makes that like weird fucking face. Just, Eventually, she gets the lever, she pulls that shit, and right, like the spike, like Short Round's hugging up to Indy like a little chihuahua, just shaking. The spike's going right down Indy's face, like right this, like near his hat, just bending the brim. And he's like, oh shit. And eventually she pulls it, and the whole door starts opening. I mean, Indy's just standing out the side of the door like this, looking at it. She's like, oh my God. Oh Jesus. She drops the lantern, and then her big old butt presses against the button again, like her big fat fanny. And Sharon's like, no, not my fault. Her fault. Her butt pressed that. And Indy's like, oh shit, we got to get going. Sharon, he gets on the other side. Fucking Indy, he grabs Kate Capshaw, yeets her through the door. He jumps out, but his hat was left behind. He manages to get his hat at the very last second. We then transition to this fucking movie. It has crazy fucking pacing. We then transition to a blue screen. They walk down the blue screen, and they start hearing this bum 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 Kalima. They start hearing this chanting, and eventually they walk out. They're on this precipice. And they look below, and there are hundreds of people, chat, hundreds of people. The Thuggy cult is real, and they see all this occult stuff, this giant statue that has skulls, and it's lathered in human meat and fingers and penises. And it's like, what the hell is going on? And we see this priest, chat, Mola Ram. Mola Ram, the head of the Thuggy cult, is presiding over a ceremony, chat. And Capture's just like, what the fuck is going on? And it's like, Indy, like, this is the Thuggy cult. This is what the villagers told us about. It's true. They are in Pankot Palace, chat. And then Mola Ram, most of his lines are in Indian, so he's speaking, that language. And he beckons to his followers to rise and go, yeah, sacrifice. He's like, yes, we shall sacrifice to appease Kalima. Kalima. And then they bring out this poor son of a bitch who may or may not have been one of their guides earlier in the movie, but they bring him out and he's lathered in flowers. And this guy's like, oh, Mom Shabai, oh, Mom Shabai, oh, Mom Shabai. And they hook him up so the statue has these chains that it holds on to, and it has this container where you could put someone in, chat, this cage, if you will. They lock this guy into the cage like this, and Mola Ram, and by the way, the music here is so fucking scary. It's like, it's like, oh, God. And Mola Ram presents himself in front of the guy peen and all. Nah, chat, not peen and all. But he's just looking at him like this, and he's like, oh. And then, Mola Ram's like, Kalima. Kalima Shakti De. Kalima. And the guy's like, oh. And then Mola Ram puts his hand over the guy's chest and just starts twisting. The guy's like, oh. And he literally forces his hand into the man's ribcage, chat, and just rips out his heart. This is a PG movie for children. Kate Capshaw's like, ah! And he's like, shut up. Then fucking Mola Ram presents the heart in front of his followers, which is still beating. They're all like, yeah, that was cool. And then the flesh of the guy then reforms in the bone, the muscle. He's like, what the fuck? And Mola Ram's like, all right, let's sacrifice him to our volcano god. And it's like, all right. And so they hook him around, they hook him up, and they open up this chasm beneath him where there's a swirling whirlpool of lava, chat. And I was like, that's not good. That's not good. And he's like, this is kind of fucked up. So he's trying to cover Short Round's eyes. Short Round's like, no, this is cool, Indy. And they start lowering this guy. And the only thing he's saying is, Mom Shabai, Mom Shabai, Mom Shabai, Mom Shabai. And Mola Ram's just like, he's just laughing, chat. As eventually as he gets closer and closer to the lava pit, this huge burst of flame just engulfs the guy. He's like, until he finally goes into the lava, chat, completely. And we cut to Mola Ram, who's holding the heart, which was steaming as it got closer to the lava whirlpool, and it bursts into flame. And he's like, and everyone's like, yeah, that was cool. They bring up the cage, chat. Guy's not there anymore. And Mola Ram's like, all right, everybody, make sure to do your 5 Kali Ma prayers, and I'll see you tomorrow for the next human sacrifice. God be with you. Kali Ma be with you. Kali Ma be with you. And so they all leave. Indiana Jones is like, well, that was exciting. I'm going to go steal the Shankara stones. He notices, chat, these priests came in, and there's 3 Shankara stones they put inside the skull, 2 for the eyes and 1 for the nose. And the stone in the nose is the stone from the village shed. It has 3 markings on it, which was the villager stone. And he's like, I'm going to go appropriate those stones. You guys wait here. I'll be right back. And she's like, Indy, please, just leave. He's like, I know, we need something. I'm not getting out of here empty-handed, okay? And so he goes ahead, he gets his whip. He swings over, he goes down the ground, and he just starts taking these fucking stones, chat, puts them into his bag, and he's like, yikes. And there's there's this giant fucking cobra, this stuffed cobra. He's like, and he's like, hey, how you doing? And he's about to leech up, but then he hears, he hears this screaming and wailing, chat. Sounds like the screaming and wailing of children. And he's like, even though I should probably leave and get myself, Short Round, my son, and Kate Capshaw out of here. I am going to investigate that scary noise down that tunnel. I'll be right back. Don't, you idiot. Didn't you watch Scream? He goes down that tunnel, chat, and it opens up to this huge fucking mining operation where all the miners are the enslaved children of the village. Yeah, probably other villages too. And these kids are being whipped and abused or malnourished or covered in urine and human shit. It's just like, wow, holy shit. We then cut back to Kate Capshaw and Short Round, who are nervous. Eventually, Kate Capshaw, where is he? Where is he? Oh! And they're attacked by two thuggy cult members who capture them. But thankfully, Short Round is like, I will sacrifice myself. And he kicks the one guy, and Kate Capshaw runs away. But it doesn't matter, chat, because she's captured like a minute later. What Short Round didn't even matter, chat. But the kid didn't know that. She's so fucking incompetent, she can't save herself. But we cut back to Indy, who's observing this, and he notices Pat Roach in brownface, chat. Pat Roach appears in all 3 Indiana Jones movies. Pat Roach, he plays the giant Nazi that Indy fights at the plane, who then gets cut up in the propeller. Pat Roach plays the giant thuggy guy, the big one with the big turban on his head, who has the big beard. That's him. And he sees Pat Roach just literally beating this small child with a whip, this little girl just... And Indy's like, I am now going to reveal myself and put myself and everyone else in danger. He takes this big fucking brick and throws it at Pat Roach in brownface and goes, boom, hits him in the back of the head, does nothing. He turns around, and Indy's like, yeah, how'd you like that? And he starts yelling at Indy and starts to get the guards to go and attack him. Indy tries to get out of there, but then he's got by the thuggy cult. They get him, chat, they get him. We then transition to the inner lair of Mola Ram, who is, chastising Indy for trying to steal the Shankara stones. You fool, we are the thuggy cult. I have brought them back from prominence, brought them back to prominence, okay? And from this palace, from Pumpcat Palace, we will rule the world. We will find the 2 other Shankara stones given to us by Shiva, and we will conquer all. The Americans, the British, the Nazis, they will all fall to us, and Kali Ma will be all powerful. And he's like, wow, you got a very fucking overactive imagination. He's like, you, Indy, you, Dr. Jones, you will be a believer in Kali Ma. Oh, I forgot. So there's one scene before this where Indy and Short Round are put into like this giant bird cage prison with these other 2 kids who are just like, the kids literally are saying, their dialogue is, I'd rather be dead than be here. I'd rather just die. And Short Round's like, why are you saying that? And he's like, because they're gonna feed us the black blood of death. Once we get fed we drink the black blood of death, we will not be ourselves. It will be like we're living an eternal nightmare. Our bodies will be taken over and we'll be one with Mola Ram. And he's like, Indy's like, well, that ain't gonna happen, kid. Don't you worry. But then Mola Ram's like, I'm gonna give you the black blood of death. And he's like, fuck. And so Short Round's telling Indy, don't drink it, Indy. It's bad. Don't drink it. And like they get this, they see the 2 kids who were turned into, slaves of Mola Ram, and they get it. And it's this cup. It's this cup with a severed human head on it that's rotting, and it's filled with, I don't know, some kind of blood mixture, some kind of voodoo mixture. And they go up to Indy, and Pat Roach is holding Indy's head, and he like pours it into Indy's mouth, and he fucking spits it out at Mola Ram and Pat Roach. And Mola Ram's like, you little shit. Also, the Maharaja, he is also a member of the cult, chat. He's under the control of Mola Ram, and he is taken a shine to beating the shit out of Short Round with a whip. So he grabs his whip and starts whipping Short Round, and he's like, stop that. Mola Ram's like, we're gonna do it to you too, you son of a bitch. We're gonna make you one of Kali Ma. And so they fucking hook up Indiana Jones, right, to get whipped, and also with little Short Round as well. Oh, and just to make sure Indy is nice and weakened through the whole thing, apparently the thuggy cult practices in voodoo, and the Maharaja has made a voodoo puppet of Indiana Jones, and he starts burning him over an open pyre, and he's like, ah, ah, ah. And then Papa Roach, he starts just whipping the shit out of Indiana Jones, like opening up his back while the Maharaja, this is a lot of violence in this movie, chat. He starts whipping little short round, and he's like, leave him alone, you fucking bastards. But Indy's weakened thanks to all the voodoo torture and all the whipping, and Pat Roach has him by the goddamn neck while Molaram pours down the black blood of death into Indy's open mouth. And he's like, okay, he's gonna have a really fucking bad trip. Give him about half hour to 45 minutes. And so they put Indy into this room. I put him on this stone bed surrounded by candles, which will definitely cause a fire at one point. And he starts going, "Ah, ah, ah," and he's like, Harrison Ford is overacting his fucking ass off, chat. And soon we cut from that, and we're with Short Round, who they have not given the black blood to, and now he is a child slave with the rest of the children. We see him working. We see him thwacking the stone like a good old little Minecraft boy. He's hitting that stone, trying to get diamonds and find the Shankara stone. But we actually see what he's doing. He's using his pickaxe to hit his chains to escape. So he weakens the chains so he can get out. But eventually we cut back to Molaram's like, hey guys, sorry that the ceremony got ruined. We're gonna do another one. Everyone's like, yeah, we love the Kali Ma ceremony. He's like, I know you guys do. I know you do. I do too. It's fucking fantastic. We're gonna find those two Shankara stones very, very soon. Also, I want to welcome, I hope you guys can welcome Dr. Indiana Jones. He has accepted Kali Ma as his one true savior. Say hello, Indiana. And everyone goes, hi, Indiana. He's like, yeah, it's great. He had a lot of that black blood of death. Anyway, let's bring out the screaming blonde-haired broad. And they bring out Kate Capsha's like, oh my God, I'm going to kick you guys' asses. Oh my God. Because she's the next human sacrifice, chat. And she sees, they put her in the cage, and all she's saying this entire scene is, oh my God, you guys are crazy. And then Malaram, he comes over, and this is a weird scene because he ripped that one guy's heart out. He goes, Kali Ma, Shakti Day. And he puts his hand over her breast, but then he just doesn't he doesn't rip her heart out. He just pretends to have her heart. He goes, see guys, I got her heart. Everyone's like, he didn't rip her heart out. What's he doing? It's weird. It's just fucking, I don't get it. I don't understand. I would have ripped it, yes, rip that shit out. But instead he's like, Dr. Jones, come, help me. He's like, and he goes over to Kate Capshaw, and she's like, Indiana, wake up, we need you. And he's like, Sudaram, Nudaram, Sudaram, Nudaram. And she goes, Patooey, and she spits in his face, and he goes, ugh. Sudaram, Mudaram. And she's like, no! And she locks her in there. And everyone's like, yeah, sacrifice the screaming howler monkey. And they put her in there, chat. Eventually cut back to Short Round, who has finally escaped. He's finally escaped, and he rushes towards the ceremony room, chat. He gets on, he interrupts the ceremony. Olaram's like, hey, get that little scamp. Short Round, he pushes over a guy, steals his torch, starts waving it in front of everyone. And he's like, Indy, wake up, Indy, wake up. And then we see one of the most horrifying things in the movie, chat, where Harrison Ford just winds back and boom, just backhands him across the face, and you see Sharon just look up at him, and Indiana Jones is like, Sudaram, Mudaram, and Sharon's like, Indy, no, and he takes the torch, he's like, Indy, I love you, and he burns him. He goes in, he's like, oh, and apparently, chap, if you burn someone with a torch, you can instantly negate the effects of the black blood of death, chat. You're no longer under its control. And so Indy, he wakes up. He's like, oh, that was weird. You got to work on that black blood of death. The fire. What if I accidentally burn myself when I'm making tea, chat? Does the black blood of death no longer affect me? Is that done? Molaram, that's some cheap fucking swill you're serving to your followers, good sir. But he wakes up. And he sees that everyone's starting to beat the shit out of Short Round, but he's like, no, he's mine. And he grabs Short Round. He's holding him over the precipice where, Cape Capture's being lowered. And he's like, it's me, kid. It's okay. And he winks at him. And Short Round's like, fuck yeah, Dr. Jones. And everybody was kung fu fighting. Everybody was fast as lightning. The fucking Short Round and Indiana Jones start kung fu fighting, Jack, and kicking the ass of the thuggy cult chat. Everyone's getting their ass kicked at this point. It's great. But Indy notices that fucking Molaram is like, he's like, oh, I gotta get the hell out of here. And he's at his altar, and he's like, hey, you. And then Molaram has this secret trap door that then goes underneath the statue. It's weird. Underneath the statue goes, and he's like, okay. He's like, oh shit, we gotta make sure Kate Capshaw's not sacrificed. We then see Shatarlal, who was the representative, the major domo of the Maharaja. He's also part of the thuggy cult, and he starts lowering Kate Capshaw in. But Indy literally goes over there and punches him in the fucking face. He flips over this giant contraption where you can pull up or pull it down, and it crushes him. It goes. And it, like, I don't know if it kills him, but it really fucks him up pretty good. And then Indy eventually, after the Short Round, he's kung fu fighting. He takes care of the rest of the thuggy cult members. He pulls up Kate Capshaw. And even though that thing, she should have been set on fire, because how much perfume does she have on, chat? She is extremely flammable, and she's not set on fire. Unbelievable, chat. Unbelievable. White privilege, chat. White privilege on full display. And so they get her up there, and they apparently can touch the bars because they're not hot. He's like, give me some slack. They put it down, opens it up, and he's like, Willie, you okay? Willie? And she goes, bam! And she slaps him across the face. And then I guess there's like, okay, time to kiss. And they kiss each other. And Short Round's like, hey, now's not the time to make love, Dr. Jones. And he's like, you're right. We got to get out of here. He takes the Shankara stones. He's like, I'm going to take these. I'm going to appropriate the fuck out of these. Here we go. Puts him in his little knapsack. And she's like, okay, we getting out of here? He goes, yeah, all of us. And then we then cut to the mine shaft of all the children. He had this one kid who's carrying this bucket, this little girl, she trips over, and this one guy starts yelling at her and is about to hit her with a whip, and then everyone starts going, oh shit, because someone just walked up on this guy. And then we cut to these other thugs who turn around as this one guy just gets his fucking block knocked off, and he's like, duh, he sails across, and we see, and this is an iconic shot, chat, of like the shaft of light in Indiana Jones where his clothes are all ripped up, and he's just standing there looking like he's been beat to hell. He's like, all right, kids, let's get the fuck out of here. Yay! And they all start grabbing the keys, and the kids start tearing apart the other thuggy guard. Like, literally, they start eating the guards, chat, because they're so malnourished. They take the keys, and Indy and Short Round and Kate Capshaw, they all start freeing them and stuff. And they all start overrunning the palace. They get out of there. That's a great scene where they're just running and they're kicking over. It's like, I would have been like stealing all that shit. Yes, I'm going to take that golden plate. Thank you very much. But actually, they're all running back to the village at this point. After that, we then get Papa Roach, chat, good old Pat Roach in complete brown face. He walks out and he's like, I'm going to beat the shit out of Indiana Jones round 2. And they start a fighting, chat, but Pat Roach, he's too goddamn big. He's too tough. Kate Capshaw literally does nothing in the scene except screech and holler. She does give Indiana Jones a bucket to hit Pat Roach with at one point, but that's about it. Eventually, Indiana and Pat Roach, they end up on a conveyor belt that crushes rocks with this giant fucking press. And Indiana starts beating him up. He starts doing a really good job. Has a fucking saw, hits Pat Roach in the gut. That damages a little bit. They're fighting, but, good old the Maharaja, he notices that Pat Roach needs some help, and so he takes out his little voodoo doll he made of Indy and just starts stabbing the shit out of him. And he's like, oh! And Pat Roach is like, hell yeah, thanks, Maharaja. You are quite welcome. And so, as the conveyor belt's going closer and closer to the press, that's what's going to happen is that, brown-faced Pat Roach is going to crush Indiana Jones. But then Short Round's like, fuck that bullshit. And he goes up there and he takes a torch and first, he starts beating the shit out of the Maharaja, who drops the Indiana Jones doll, the voodoo doll, and Short Round takes out the dagger from Indiana Jones' back, and we hear the fucking Indiana Jones music, bum, ba-dum, bum, 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 ba-dum, bum, 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 bum. Indy's fucking pissed, and he starts beating the shit out of Pat Roach, and we cut back to Short Round, who's beating the shit out of the Maharaja. It's like, that's his son. That's his goddamn son right there. That's what I keep telling you, Chad. It's like, I see what you're doing here. I see what you're doing here, Spielberg. Stranger Shoe, have a fantastic evening. Thank you for stopping by the stream. Eventually, though, the Pat Roach and fucking Indiana Jones are tired. But then Pat Roach's little turban, his shawl belt, it gets stuck into the press, and he's like, oh, he starts panicking because he's getting sucked into it. And I do appreciate that Indiana Jones recognized that and did try to help him. I think that's a cool scene. He's like, all right, you're just going to die now. He actively tried to help the guy where Indy's like pulling on him, trying to get him to come over to his side. And like he grabs the guy grabs like a rope and Indy's trying to pull the rope so he stays up. But at this point, Pat Roach is too heavy and the momentum of the press is too much that Pat Roach is squished. That's a lot of man. He goes, and he's all squished. And we see this huge meaty blood smear. And Kate Capshaw's like, ew, gross. At this point, Indy's on this these platforms, and more of these guards start coming out and just shooting the shit out of him. Chad, he's like, "Fucking Jesus!" He's swinging over. Eventually, crashes down, and Kate Capshaw and Short Round, they get into a mine cart, and they're like, "Indy, let's go, Indy!" Indy yeets himself into the mine cart, chat, and they that's the other thing too. I forgot to mention. When the Maharaja comes out of his blood of black death phase, he says, "You must go to the right. The left is death when you go down the mine carts." And, Short Round's like, thanks. They do like a bro fist. And they go down there. Indy, he's like, we're definitely going to go to the left. We're definitely going to go to the left. And he's like, no, Indy, no. Maharaja said right. And they go to the left. And that's death, Chad. You can tell it's death because it's red. While the other one is nice and blue. That's not good. Wolaram's like, go after them right now. And we get an incredible action sequence. This funny enough, this action sequence was supposed to be a part of Raiders of the Lost Ark, but they thought, well, we have already too many action sequences. We'll save it for another movie. And they added it here in Temple of Doom. And I love all of this shit. I mean, I don't know how you managed to build, these mine tracks, these railroad tracks under lava or, above lava and stuff. I was like, this is pretty rough working conditions, but it's a fantastic sequence, Chad. And we how they are like beating some of these guys, like Indy's throwing debris in the ground, like his big piece of wood, and it puts on the tracks, and the guys goes boom, they all flip forward and they're all crushed. There's this other minecart that comes through and like brushes up past all these guys. Eventually they end up on two separate tracks, and like one of them grabs Short Round and it's over like a giant lake of lava, and they're like stretching Short Round like a Stretch Armstrong. Is it just me, or is like Short Round like super stretchy in this scene? He's like, help. It's like his arms are like, we're gonna rip them out of their sockets. But they eventually defeat all of these guards that are pursuing them. Molaram's like, fuck it. Who cares? We'll start over from the beginning. Just flood the entire area. And they have this giant bucket of water. I can't even describe. It's like the biggest bucket in the world. And he's like, destroy this shit. And it tips over, chat. And he's like, the water will kill them all. He goes, and the water goes down these tunnels. Eventually, they're coming to the end of it, and they're using the brake, but the brake snaps. And Indy has to get in front of the minecart and stop it with his feet. And he goes, "Ugh!" And at the last second, Chad, it stops before he's like, crushed. And he's like, but realizes that his fucking feet are on fire. He's like, water. And then they're putting dust and dirt on his feet to put out his shoe. And he's like, water. And then he looks straight ahead and he sees the water coming down the tunnel. He's like, water. And they start running down the opposite tunnel. As a huge giant tidal wave chases them, and they're like, okay, there's light at the end of the tunnel, let's go. But they stop at the very edge. Kate Capshaw's like, oh my God. And they go to either side of this blue screen, chat, as the cave uses the Pokemon move of Hydro Pump. It hydro pumps out there, chat, but it misses them, but it's still destroying the sides of the wall. And it's like, listen, I'll meet you guys on the other side, okay, just get out of here. Contact Colonel Blumblart or whatever. And so they start climbing. Eventually, Kate Capshaw and Short Round, they get to this bridge, get to the other side, and Kate Capshaw is, fuck that. I am not going across that rickety-ass bridge. Short Round's like, no, it's safe, come. Strong bridge. So it's like he's jumping on that, and then he jumps on one board and goes, boo, goes right through, and he's like, help. And Capshaw has to go over there, and she lifts him up. She's like, I got you. And they continue across the bridge. Eventually cut to Indiana Jones, who is accosted by two of the thuggy cult members, and they got like swords and shit. And he's like, oh, I got this. About to pull out his revolver, not knowing that they took it from him. He goes, and he has to battle him. He has to battle him. He kicks their ass, uses the whip and everything. Boom, 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 and they all start fleeing. And he gets the sword, and this is actually a reference to a scene in A New Hope where Han Solo charges at all these stormtroopers. It's like a little wink in the nod of the audience, where he has this whip and he has his sword. He goes, oh, 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 and he starts running away as this giant army of thuggy cult members chase after him. Eventually, we cut back to Kate Capshaw in Short Round. They've made it across the bridge, but Kate Capshaw goes, because it's Mola Ram just going, chill out, okay? It's just me. My God, you know what I look like. We then cut to Indiana Jones, who's running across the bridge as well, but he stops because he sees Mola Ram and with Kate Capshaw in Short Round, and he's like, oh, shit. And Mola Ram's like, get on the fucking bridge. We're gonna finish this once and for all. And they all start getting on the bridge, and he's like, Mola Ram, just let him go. Let him go. And he's like, or what, Dr. Jones? Or what? He's like, or I'll drop him. I have the Shankara stones right here. I'll drop him right now into the alligator. Alligator? Alligators aren't native to India. Oh, yeah, we had him shipped in. All right. I'll drop him in the alligator-infested waters. And Mola Ram's like, do it. Fucking do it, man. They'll be found. But you won't. And Indy's like, shit, I was bluffing. This is not good. They call me on my bluff. And Indy's like, I got one last trick up my sleeve. My metaphorical sleeves, because I don't have sleeves anymore. And he starts wrapping his leg around this one, like the rope bridge. It's this one spare rope. And he starts speaking in Chinese to Short Round. And he speaks in Short Round, and Short Round's like, oh, shit. And he's like, Willie, grab the rope, start twisting around you. And she's like, why? We're about to go for a ride. And she looks at Indy, and he goes, he raised the sword above his head. And she's like, oh my God, he's crazy. He's not crazy. He's nuts. She's like, oh my God. And then we cut back to Indiana Jones, and I love his line. He looks fucking insane here, chat. He's like, Mola Ram, prepare to meet Kali in hell. And he starts cutting the rope. Mola Ram's like, oh, fuck, the crazy son of a bitch is doing it. Oh. And everyone starts fucking panicking until he gets one good cut, chat. And after this, the whole bridge just fucking snaps and it goes. And everyone starts falling. And everyone's like, ah! And some of the thuggy cult members, they fall right into the alligators below. They all get eaten, chat. There's no meat, but there's a lot of clothes, unless they swam away. But on the left side of the bridge, where Indy is attached to and Kate Capshaw and Sharon are attached to, they're holding on to the bridge along with Mola Ram and some of the thuggy cult members. And they're like, oh, shit, this is just a really bad situation. This is just really not good. Mola Ram, he's trying to crawl up at this point, but then he gets like a bad piece of wood and he falls. He's like, ah! And he lands right underneath Kate Capshaw and Short Round. And he hits the one guy and he falls and almost hits Indy at that point. Meanwhile, Mola Ram's like to the other members across the canyon, shoot him with all the bows and arrows that you can get. Puncture this motherfucker. And so they all shooting him with arrows. All these arrows they all hit Indy. He's like, Jesus. And he keeps climbing at this point. Mola Ram then grabs this one guy who's just kind of hanging out there. His one cult member is probably his number one fan. And he's like, hey, buddy. He's like, hey, Mola Ram, I'm a really big fan. He's like, that's great. You're going to fucking die now. He's like, no. And he fucking rips the guy off the bridge and throws him in Indy. And Indy's like, just misses completely. Just a big whiff. But he's like, fuck. And he continues climbing back up. And then Short Round and Kate Capshaw just start smashing onto the feet of Mola Ram's like, and he lets go. And eventually he slams right into Indy. And I love this scene because it's just two humans just flailing. Because you can't really fight because you're hanging so high up in the air. And you're just going, fuck you. And they're just fighting. I just love it. Thank you. Ooh, we got a new follower chat. Blue-Eyed Games. Thank you for the follow. My new Huckleberry, my new Grinch. Hope you're having a very nice evening tonight. We're at the end, the finale of Indiana Jones and the Temple of Doom. But eventually the two are just, that's the thing. Like Kalima is like, I got one fucking, or not, Molaran, he's got like, I got one trick up my sleeve. Kalima. And he's like, Kalima, shocked it. And he puts his hand on Indy's chest. And everyone's like, Indy, cover your heart. And it's like, oh my God. And she's trying to rip out the heart of Indiana Jones. But Indiana Jones just fucking takes his hand. He's like, and just like starts punching him with his own fist. He's like, stop hitting yourself, Molaram. Stop hitting yourself. And he punches his own fist so hard that Molaram's like, okay, I just need a goddamn second here. But before Indy can keep climbing up, Molaram grabs onto the satchel where the Shankara stones are, chat. And he's like, the stones are mine! And Indiana Jones is like, you betray Shiva. And he starts saying some incantation. You betray Shiva. You betray Shiva. And all of a sudden, the stones in the satchel begin to burn, and they burn through the satchel, and two of them fall out. And then the third one, the villager's stone, falls out. But Molaran decides, like, you know what? I don't think it's that hot. And he grabs the molten fucking stone as it just horrifically burns his hand. He goes, ah! And he fucking throws it up in the air. Indy catches it because he did not betray Shiva. And Molaran cascades down the canyon wall and then, boom, is swallowed and devoured by the alligators below. Eventually, we then cut up to the cliff where we see the British. The British have arrived, and Colonel Blumblart is there along with the Maharaja, and they begin to shoot at the various thuggy cult members. Eventually, Kate Capshaw and Short Round, they get up on top, and then Indy finally gets up on top, and he has the stone. And they'll go, ha, 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 ha. He's like, can you guys fucking help me up? We then transition to the village, chat. Life has come back into the village. It's filled with green fruits and vegetables. The animals are healthy again. The people are starting to become healthy again. And all of a sudden, they spot someone in the distance. And we see Indiana Jones. We see Kate Capshaw and Short Round. And they're like, oh. And they see that he looks like he has an object and run right behind him. They look like Indy and Kate Capshaw and Short Round look behind them. And this huge tidal wave of children start running into the village. And all the parents start cheering. And they're like, yes, yes. And they all start hugging and finding their children. They start hugging them and celebrating, and you hear the bum bada bum 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 bada bum 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 bum, and then the village elder greets Indiana Jones, and the village elder's like, I fucking told you, man, the magic's real. He's like, yeah, you're right, I'm not gonna appropriate. He's like, you're good, man. And they get the stone, they put it back onto its mantelpiece. Everyone's like, yay. And eventually Indy goes over to Kate Capshaw. He's like, hey, why don't you want to go to Delhi with me, hang out a bit? And she's like, the last thing I want to fucking do is go hang out in Delhi with you, okay? I'm going to go back to Missouri where we're not eating a snake surprise or having human sacrifices or almost dying on a bridge that you cut. No, I'm going home. And she's walking away. She's strutting, chat, and he uses his whip and goes, whoosh, and he whips her, chat, and he brings her closer to him. And he's like, how about a forced kiss? And she's like, okay, and they start kissing, chat, but then fucking Short Round's on the elephant, and the elephant uses hydro pump, and it sprays them both in water. And he goes, ha, 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 very funny, ha, 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 very funny. And they're like, oh, you scamp. And then Indiana Jones and Kate Capshaw start smooching on each other's faces, and all the children of the village start to circle around them, Chad, just celebrating these two people who will never see each other again and their fling of a romance. And that, my friends, is my scene by scene by scene by scene breakdown of Indiana Jones and the Temple of Doom. Now, like I said, this movie has various issues. I think it's still fun. I love the relationship between Indy and Short Round. I like the aesthetic of the film. I think it's really, really cool. I like that it just wasn't Nazis this time. But there's a lot of negatives. Racism, Kate Capshaw, no doubt about that. I would probably have to give it like it's a high matinee, chat. I would give it a high matinee for myself. And that, my friends, is my review for the Temple of Doom. And I still have two more Indiana Jones movies review, chat, one day. Last Crusade, and Kingdom of the Crystal Skull. Woo-wee! Thank you, RD. As a child, the alligator scene scared me, but I thought ripping out the man's heart was cool. I was scared by the ripping out the heart. I like the alligator scene because I was into them. Like, ooh, I like alligators. Kareem, we are going to die. The saddest face imaginable. Oh, Vanny, can you see The Last Crusade for my birthday? Hell yeah, man. We could do that. Yes. Definitely. That'll be fun. It'll be a fun review. This might be an unpopular opinion, but I like this movie more than Raiders. Not to each their own, of course. I know a lot of people that love this movie. I think a lot of people growing up when they're younger, this is like their favorite Indiana Jones film. But I know several people who love this film, and it is their favorite Indiana Jones. But yeah, there you go, guys. I hope you enjoyed the review. Apologies if I missed some biddies along the way. When I'm into my reviews, I'm into my reviews. Let me go ahead and get back in here and thank some people who are donating. Thank you, Morsel of Bilbo, the greatest hobbit of them all. Luke Bossy, get their biddies. Indiana Jones all of a sudden an authority on Hindu religious figures. Of course, man. Of course. It would have been funny if they saw Short Round being grossed out and they called him, I know. Oh, yeah, I remember that. I think what saves it is that these people are part of a weird cult, right? Oh, yeah, I'm just reading a lot of these comments. But no, thank you again for all the generosity, chat. All the biddies. Pablo Bayer and Blue Eyed Games. Thank you for the follows. You're my new Grinches, my new Huckleberries. But now, chat, it's probably, listen, this movie is problematic. It's dated. A little racist. No doubt about that. But, acknowledging that, I still think there is a lot of good stuff in this movie. There's some fun scenes. And so, yeah, I would give it like a high matinee. I would give it a high matinee. Not by no means perfect, though. But, chat, I'm going to go ahead and take a quick break.